Chapter 1 The Halloween Office Party Chapter 1 The Halloween office party. The fluorescent lights of the office flickered ominously, casting long shadows that danced across the walls. Just days before, the team had gathered in the conference room to discuss the upcoming Halloween office party, a tradition that had somehow survived the years of corporate monotony. Laughter and playful banter had filled the air as they brainstormed costume ideas and party games, each suggestion more outrageous than the last. But now, as the clock ticked closer to 5, the atmosphere buzzed with a different kind of energy, one that crackled with anticipation and a hint of mischief. Paige stood at the entrance, her heart racing as she took in the transformation of their mundane workspace. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling like ghostly veils, and jack-o'-lanterns flickered with candlelight, their carved faces grinning wickedly. Eerie lights pulsed in shades of green and purple, casting an otherworldly glow over the desks and cubicles. The scent of pumpkin spice wafted through the air, mingling with the faint aroma of burnt popcorn from the break room, where someone had attempted to make Halloween-themed treats. "Wow, they really went all out this year," Brad said, stepping up beside her. He was dressed as a vampire, complete with a flowing black cape and exaggerated fangs that glinted under the dim lights. His dark hair was slicked back, giving him an air of brooding charm that made Paige's stomach flutter. "Yeah, it is almost too spooky," she replied, forcing a smile as she adjusted her witch's hat. The hat was slightly askew, a last-minute purchase from a discount store, but it felt fitting for her role as the office's resident mischief maker. "I hope no one gets too scared." "Scared? This is just the right amount of creepy," Brad said, his eyes sparkling with excitement. "Besides, I think it is the perfect backdrop for some Halloween games. You ready to lose at bobbing for apples?" "Not a chance," she shot back, her competitive spirit igniting. "I've been practicing." As they moved deeper into the office, the sounds of laughter and playful screams echoed around them. Caitlin, dressed as a fairy with shimmering wings, was attempting to convince Mary-Kate, who had come as a zombie bride, to join her in a game of charades. Ashley, sporting a cat costume with whiskers painted on her cheeks, was already in the middle of a heated debate with Brad about the best horror movies of all time. "Everyone knows, The Shining is the best," Ashley exclaimed, her voice rising above the chatter. "You can't beat Jack Nicholson's performance." "Please, Psycho is a classic for a reason," Brad countered, crossing his arms dramatically. "It's all about the suspense." Paige watched the exchange with a smile, feeling the warmth of camaraderie envelop her like a cozy blanket. This was what she loved about the office. The way they could come together, shedding their professional facades for a night of fun and laughter. But beneath the surface, she sensed an undercurrent of tension, particularly between Brad and Ashley. The way they locked eyes, the subtle jabs they exchanged, hinted at something deeper, something unresolved. "All right, everyone," Mary-Kate called out, her voice cutting through the noise. "Let's gather around for the first game. We're starting with a classic. Halloween charades." The group quickly formed a circle, excitement bubbling over as they prepared for the first round. Paige felt a rush of adrenaline as she stepped forward, ready to take her turn. She loved charades. It was a chance to be silly, to let loose. As she acted out her first word, "Ghost," the room erupted in laughter, her exaggerated movements drawing cheers and playful jeers. "Come on, Paige, you can do better than that," Brad teased, his laughter infectious. "Just wait until it is your turn, vampire boy," she shot back, her heart racing at the playful banter. As the game continued, the energy in the room shifted. Laughter turned to gasps as Caitlin mimed a witch, her movements eerily accurate, and the group erupted into applause. But as the night wore on, Paige couldn't shake the feeling that something was brewing beneath the surface. The playful competition was laced with an edge of tension, particularly when Brad and Ashley were involved. "Okay, My turn, Brad announced, stepping into the center of the circle. He took a deep breath, his expression shifting from playful to serious as he prepared to act out his word. The room fell silent, all eyes on him. He began to mimic a chainsaw, revving his imaginary engine with exaggerated movements. Laughter erupted, but Paige noticed Ashley's expression change. She crossed her arms, her brow furrowing slightly as she watched him. There was something in her eyes. Something that hinted at a deeper frustration. Chainsaw Massacre, Caitlin shouted, her voice breaking the tension. Correct. Brad grinned, but his gaze lingered on Ashley, a flicker of something unspoken passing between them. Paige felt a pang of unease. She had always sensed a connection between Brad and Ashley, an unacknowledged tension that simmered just below the surface. It was as if they were two magnets, drawn together yet repelled by something they couldn't quite articulate. As the game continued, Paige found herself increasingly distracted by the dynamic between them. The laughter and cheers faded into the background as she watched Brad and Ashley interact, their playful jabs tinged with an undercurrent of something more. All right, next up, Mary-Kate called, pulling Paige from her thoughts. Ashley, you're up. Ashley stepped into the center, her confidence radiating as she prepared to act out her word. But as she began to mimic a witch stirring a cauldron, her eyes darted toward Brad, and for a moment, Paige could see the vulnerability behind her playful facade. Come on, Ashley. You can do it, Caitlin cheered, but the encouragement seemed to fall flat. Paige felt a surge of empathy for Ashley. She knew what it was like to feel overshadowed, to struggle for attention in a room full of vibrant personalities. But as Ashley finished her turn, her expression shifted from playful to frustrated, and she stormed back to her spot in the circle. Okay, who's next? Mary-Kate asked, trying to keep the energy up. Let's do a group round, Brad suggested, his eyes flicking between Paige and Ashley. Everyone in. As they formed a haphazard circle, Paige felt the tension in the air thicken. The laughter resumed, but it was tinged with an unspoken weight. She caught Brad's eye, and for a moment, the world around them faded. There was something electric in his gaze, a spark that sent her heart racing. All right, let's see who can guess the most, Mary-Kate announced, clapping her hands together. On 3, 3. They shouted in unison, and the game resumed. Chapter 2. Chapter 2. The Costume Contest. Chapter 2. The costume contest. The office hummed with a vibrant energy, a stark contrast to the usual humdrum of spreadsheets and conference calls. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling like delicate lace, and jack-o'-lanterns flickered with mischievous grins, casting playful shadows on the walls. Laughter echoed through the air as Paige, Brad, Caitlin, Mary-Kate, and Ashley reveled in the Halloween festivities, their costumes transforming the mundane workspace into a whimsical playground of creativity and camaraderie. The scent of caramel apples and pumpkin spice wafted through the room, mingling with the crisp autumn air that seeped in through the slightly ajar window. As the clock ticked closer to the highlight of the evening, the costume contest, excitement crackled like static electricity. The group gathered in a circle, their costumes a kaleidoscope of colors and characters. Caitlin, with her pointed hat and flowing black robes, looked every bit the part of a witch, her emerald green eyes sparkling with mischief. Mary-Kate, on the other hand, had transformed into a zombie, her face painted a ghastly white with dark circles under her eyes, and tattered clothes that hung from her frame like a ghostly shroud. Okay, everyone, gather round, Brad called, his voice booming over the chatter. He stood at the front of the room, dressed as a dashing vampire, complete with a flowing cape and slicked back hair. It's time for the costume contest. Let's see who's going to take home the coveted title of Best Costume. The crowd erupted in cheers, and the anticipation in the air was palpable. Paige felt her heart race, a mix of excitement and anxiety swirling within her. She had chosen to dress as a classic witch, complete with a black dress and a pointy hat, but her costume felt lackluster compared to Caitlin's elaborate ensemble. She glanced at her friend, who was basking in the attention, and a pang of jealousy twisted in her stomach. "Don't worry, Paige," Ashley said, nudging her lightly. Dressed as a playful cat, her ears perked up with every word. "You look amazing. Just own it." Paige forced a smile, but her mind was already racing with thoughts of how she could stand out. The contest was more than just a fun event. It was a chance to shine, to be seen, and to escape the shadows of self-doubt that often loomed over her. "First up, let's have Caitlin," Brad announced, gesturing for her to step forward. The crowd erupted in applause as Caitlin twirled, her long black dress swirling around her like a dark cloud. She struck a pose, her fingers splayed dramatically, and the audience cheered louder. "Witchy vibes," someone shouted, and Caitlin beamed, soaking in the adoration. Next, Mary-Kate shuffled forward, her zombie shuffle eliciting laughter and applause. She moaned playfully, her arms outstretched, and the crowd joined in, mimicking her movements. "Brains," she called out, and the laughter grew, filling the room with a sense of camaraderie. As the contest continued, Paige felt the weight of her own costume pressing down on her. She watched as others showcased their creativity. Brad's vampire charm, Ashley's feline grace, and even a few others who had gone all out with their costumes. Each presentation was met with cheers and laughter, but with every round, Paige's confidence waned. "Okay, now it is your turn, Paige," Brad called, his voice cutting through her thoughts. Paige's heart raced as she stepped forward, the spotlight suddenly feeling like a spotlight of judgment. She took a deep breath, trying to channel the confidence she had seen in Caitlin and Mary-Kate. I'm a witch," she said, her voice wavering slightly. "A classic one, you know." The crowd clapped politely, but she could sense the lack of enthusiasm compared to the previous contestants. She felt her cheeks flush, and she quickly added, "I can do a spell." With a flick of her wrist, she pretended to cast a spell, her fingers dancing in the air. "Abracadabra, make this night magical," she exclaimed, trying to inject some humor into her performance. A few chuckles rippled through the audience, but it wasn't enough to quell the gnawing insecurity that had settled in her stomach. "Great job, Paige," Caitlin cheered, her voice genuine. "You totally nailed it." "Yeah, you did," Mary-Kate chimed in, her zombie makeup somehow making her look even more enthusiastic. Paige smiled, grateful for their support, but the doubt lingered. As the contest continued, she watched the others with a mix of admiration and envy. The tension in the room began to build as the final contestants took their turns, each one more creative than the last. Finally, Brad gathered everyone back together, his expression serious. "All right, everyone, it's time to announce the winners." The room fell silent, anticipation hanging thick in the air. In third place, we have Mary-Kate as the zombie. Cheers erupted as Mary-Kate did a little zombie dance, her excitement infectious. In second place, we have Caitlin as the witch. The applause was thunderous, and Caitlin beamed, her eyes sparkling with joy. Paige felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She had hoped for at least a mention, but as the crowd cheered for Caitlin, she couldn't shake the feeling of being overshadowed. And now, for the moment we've all been waiting for, the winner of the best costume is Brad as the vampire. The room erupted into applause, but Paige felt a strange mix of emotions. She clapped along with everyone else, but inside, she felt a twinge of disappointment. Brad had looked great, but she had hoped for a different outcome. As the crowd celebrated, Caitlin leaned in closer to Paige, her voice low. "Hey, don't let it get to you. You looked amazing up there." "Seriously, thanks," Paige replied, forcing a smile. "I just thought maybe what?" Caitlin pressed, her eyes searching Paige's face. "Maybe I could have done better," Paige admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I wanted to stand out. Caitlin's expression softened. You did stand out. You're you, and that's what matters. Besides, it is just a costume contest. We're all here to have fun, right? Paige nodded, but the words felt hollow. The contest had revealed more than just costumes. It had exposed her insecurities, the nagging feeling that she was always in someone else's shadow. As the night wore on, the atmosphere shifted. The laughter and cheers began to fade, replaced by a subtle tension that hung in the air. Conversations turned to whispers, and Paige caught snippets of discussions that hinted at rivalries brewing beneath the surface. Did you see how Caitlin was practically begging for attention? One voice. Chapter 3 The Mysterious Plane Crash. Chapter 3 The mysterious plane crash. The Halloween party was in full swing, the air thick with laughter and the sweet scent of caramel apples mingling with the sharp tang of pumpkin spice. Paige, Brad, Caitlin, Mary-Kate, and Ashley had transformed the office into a haunted haven, draping cobwebs from the ceiling and placing jack-o'-lanterns on every desk. The costume contest had just concluded, with Caitlin's witch ensemble and Mary-Kate's zombie makeup stealing the spotlight, igniting a playful rivalry that crackled like the flickering candles illuminating the room. But as the group reveled in their victories and playful banter, a sudden hush fell over the crowd. The flickering lights dimmed, and the television in the corner flickered to life, casting an eerie glow across the room. The news anchor's voice cut through the festive atmosphere, grave and urgent. We interrupt this program for breaking news. A plane has crashed onto a train heading towards the Bermuda Triangle. Eyewitnesses report a strange light in the sky moments before the crash. Details are still emerging, but authorities are urging everyone to stay away from the area. Paige's heart raced, the festive mood evaporating like mist in the morning sun. She exchanged glances with her friends, their faces a mix of disbelief and intrigue. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. Caitlin, still in her witch costume, leaned closer to the screen, her eyes wide. "The Bermuda Triangle. Isn't that where all those ships and planes go missing?" Mary-Kate, her zombie makeup smudged slightly from the excitement, nodded. "Yeah, it is like a black hole for transportation. They say it is cursed or something." Brad, ever the skeptic, scoffed. "Cursed? Come on, it is just a series of unfortunate accidents. Planes crash all the time." Ashley, dressed as a fairy, fluttered her wings nervously. "But this is different. A plane crashing onto a train. That's insane. What if it is connected to the triangle?" The group fell silent, the weight of the news settling over them like a heavy fog. The flickering images on the screen showed emergency responders rushing to the scene, their flashing lights casting an otherworldly glow against the darkening sky. The anchor continued, detailing the chaos unfolding, but the words became a distant hum as Paige's mind raced. "Do you think we should go?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and curiosity. "What if we could help?" "Help?" Brad raised an eyebrow, skepticism etched on his face. "What could we possibly do? We're not first responders. But we could at least see what happened," Caitlin insisted, her witch's hat slipping slightly as she leaned forward. "This is history in the making." Mary-Kate shrugged, her zombie makeup giving her an oddly serious expression. "I don't know, guys. It sounds dangerous. What if there's something weird going on?" Paige felt a shiver run down her spine at Mary-Kate's words. The Bermuda Triangle had always been a source of fascination and fear, a place where reality blurred with the supernatural. "Maybe we should just stay here," she suggested, her voice wavering. "It's safer." But the allure of the unknown tugged at her, a siren's call that promised adventure and danger in equal measure. She glanced at Brad, who was now staring intently at the screen, his expression unreadable. "What do you think?" she asked, her heart pounding in her chest. "I think we should be cautious," he replied, his voice steady. But if we're going to go, we should go now. Before it gets too late. The decision hung in the air, charged with tension. Paige felt a mix of excitement and dread, her mind racing with the possibilities of what lay ahead. "Okay," she said finally, her voice firming with resolve. "Let's go." As they gathered their things, the atmosphere shifted from festive to tense, the thrill of adventure mingling with an undercurrent of fear. They stepped out into the cool night air, the moon casting an eerie glow over the streets as they made their way to Brad's car. The world felt different now, the shadows deeper and the sounds sharper, as if the very fabric of reality had shifted. The drive was filled with an electric silence, each of them lost in their thoughts. Paige's heart raced as they approached the outskirts of the city, the lights of the party fading into the distance. The road ahead twisted and turned, leading them deeper into the unknown. "What if we find something?" Caitlin broke the silence, her voice a mix of excitement and fear. "What if there are survivors? Or what if it is something worse?" Ashley added, her wings rustling nervously. "What if we're not supposed to be there?" Brad glanced at her through the rearview mirror, his expression serious. "We'll be careful. We stick together, no matter what." As they drove closer, the air grew thick with tension, the weight of the unknown pressing down on them. The news reports had mentioned that the crash site was near an abandoned train station, a place long forgotten by time. The thought sent a chill down Paige's spine, but she pushed it aside, focusing instead on the thrill of the adventure. When they finally arrived, the scene was surreal. Emergency vehicles lit up the night, their flashing lights casting long shadows across the ground. The smell of smoke hung in the air, mingling with the scent of damp earth and rusted metal. A crowd had gathered, a mix of onlookers and first responders, their faces illuminated by the harsh glow of the lights. "Stay close," Brad instructed as they stepped out of the car, the gravel crunching beneath their feet. The atmosphere was charged with a sense of urgency, the air thick with tension and fear. Paige's heart raced as they approached the perimeter set up by the authorities. The sight of the wreckage sent a wave of nausea through her. The plane, a twisted mass of metal and smoke, lay crumpled against the train tracks, the train itself eerily still, as if frozen in time. The sight was both horrifying and mesmerizing, a stark reminder of the fragility of life. "Look," Caitlin pointed, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're pulling someone out." Paige's breath caught in her throat as she watched the first responders work, their movements swift and practiced. A figure was being pulled from the wreckage, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. The crowd held its breath, a collective gasp echoing through the night. "Is that?" Mary Kate's voice trailed off, her eyes wide with disbelief. But before they could process what they were seeing, a loud explosion rocked the ground beneath them, sending a shockwave through the air. The crowd erupted into chaos, screams piercing the night as people scrambled to escape the danger. "Run!" Brad shouted, grabbing Paige's hand and pulling her away from the scene. The world around them blurred as they raced back to the car, adrenaline surging through Chapter 4. The first signs of trouble. Chapter 4. The first signs of trouble. The laughter and chatter from the Halloween party echoed through the dimly lit office, a stark contrast to the eerie decorations that adorned every corner. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling, and jack-o'-lanterns flickered ominously, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Paige, Brad, Caitlin, Mary Kate, and Ashley had embraced the festive spirit, their costumes a kaleidoscope of creativity and whimsy. Caitlin, with her witch's hat tilted jauntily, had captivated everyone with her spellbinding charm, while Mary Kate's zombie makeup had drawn gasps of admiration. But just as the excitement peaked with the announcement of the costume contest winner, a news report about a plane crash near the Bermuda Triangle had cast a pall over the festivities, leaving an unsettling tension in the air. Now, as the party continued, the atmosphere shifted. The overhead lights flickered, casting an erratic glow that made the shadows seem to stretch and twist. A strange noise echoed from the break room. A low, mechanical whirring that sent a shiver down Paige's spine. She exchanged a glance with Brad, who stood beside her, his brow furrowed in concern. "Did you hear that?" Paige asked, her voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might summon whatever was lurking in the shadows. Brad nodded, his eyes narrowing. "Yeah, it sounded like it came from the coffee machine. I'll check it out." Paige hesitated, her heart racing. The break room was a small, cramped space, filled with the scent of stale coffee and the remnants of half-eaten Halloween treats. "I'll come with you," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. She didn't want to be alone, not with the strange occurrences piling up like the decorations around them. Together, they made their way to the break room, the laughter from the party fading into a distant hum. As they approached, the whirring noise grew louder, punctuated by an occasional sputter that sounded almost like a laugh. The door creaked open, revealing the coffee machine sputtering and shaking as if possessed. A stream of coffee shot out, splattering against the counter like a dark, viscous fountain. "What the hell?" Brad exclaimed, stepping closer to inspect the machine. "It's like it is gone haywire." Paige leaned against the doorframe, crossing her arms as she watched him. "Maybe someone rigged it as a prank. You know how people get during Halloween." "Yeah, but this is a bit much, don't you think?" Brad replied, his tone laced with skepticism. He reached out to touch the machine, and it emitted a final, loud sputter before falling silent. "See, it's not even plugged in properly." Paige stepped inside, the smell of burnt coffee wafting up to greet her. "Maybe it is just old. This place has seen better days." She tried to lighten the mood, but the unease lingered like a shadow. Just then, the lights flickered again, plunging the room into darkness for a heartbeat before returning. The sudden change made Paige's heart race. "Okay, that's creepy," she said, her voice trembling slightly. Brad turned to her, his expression serious. "Let's not overthink it. It's probably just a faulty circuit or something. We should head back before the others start wondering where we are." As they stepped back into the main office, the laughter had resumed, but it felt different now, tinged with an undercurrent of anxiety. Caitlin and Mary-Kate were huddled together, their faces animated as they discussed the costume contest. Ashley was trying to convince a reluctant Brad to join a game of truth or scare, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "Hey, did you guys find out what was making that noise?" Caitlin called out, her witch's hat bobbing as she leaned forward, eager for gossip. "Just the coffee machine acting up," Brad replied, forcing a smile. "Nothing to worry about." But as he spoke, Paige caught a glimpse of Mary-Kate's expression. The zombie's painted face was a mask of concern, her eyes darting toward the break room as if she could sense something amiss. It sent a chill down Paige's spine. The party continued, but the flickering lights and strange noises had planted seeds of doubt in everyone's minds. As the evening wore on, more oddities began to surface. The music from the speakers warped and distorted, the upbeat tunes twisting into eerie echoes that sent shivers down their spines. A cold draft swept through the office, causing the decorations to sway as if they were alive. "Is it just me, or is it getting colder in here?" Ashley asked, rubbing her arms as she glanced around, her playful demeanor faltering. "It's Halloween," Caitlin said, trying to sound lighthearted. "Maybe the spirits are joining the party." "Very funny," Brad muttered, his eyes scanning the room. "But seriously, it feels like something's off." Paige felt the tension in the air, thick and palpable. She caught Brad's gaze, and for a moment, the world around them faded. There was an unspoken understanding between them, a shared sense of unease that seemed to bind them together. But before she could voice her thoughts, the lights flickered again, this time plunging the office into darkness for several long seconds. When the lights returned, the atmosphere had shifted. The laughter had died down, replaced by a heavy silence. The group exchanged nervous glances, the playful spirit of the party evaporating like mist in the morning sun. "Okay, this is getting weird," Mary-Kate said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe we should just call it a night." "No way," Ashley protested, her bravado returning. "We can't let a few flickering lights ruin our Halloween. Let's play a game." "Yeah, let's do Truth or Scare," Caitlin chimed in, her enthusiasm returning as she clapped her hands together. "It'll be fun." Paige felt a knot tighten in her stomach. "Are you sure that's a good idea? With everything that's been happening?" "Come on, Paige," Brad said, his voice soothing. "It's just a game. What's the worst that could happen?" She opened her mouth to protest but found herself silenced by the warmth of his gaze. There was something comforting about his presence, a sense of safety that made her want to lean into it. "Okay, fine," she relented, forcing a smile. "But let's keep it light, all right." As they gathered in a circle, the tension began to dissipate, replaced by a nervous excitement. The first few rounds were filled with laughter and playful dares, but as the game progressed, the questions grew more personal, the dares more daring. "Okay, Caitlin, truth or scare?" Ashley asked, her eyes gleaming with mischief. "Truth," Caitlin replied, her confidence unwavering. "Who do you have a crush on in the office?" Ashley asked, her voice dripping with anticipation. See Chapter 5. Chapter 5. The Murder Mystery Unfolds. Chapter 5. The murder mystery unfolds. The laughter and chatter from the Halloween party had filled the office with a vibrant energy, a stark contrast to the eerie decorations that adorned the space. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling like ghostly drapes, and the flickering lights cast shadows that danced across the walls. Paige, Brad, Caitlin, Mary-Kate, and Ashley had reveled in the festivities, their costumes transforming the mundane office into a whimsical realm of witches, zombies, and playful spirits. But the atmosphere shifted when the news report about the plane crash interrupted their merriment, a chilling reminder of the world outside. As the lights flickered ominously and strange noises echoed from the break room, a sense of foreboding settled over the group, unnoticed but palpable. Now, the air was thick with tension, and the laughter had faded into an unsettling silence. A piercing scream shattered the stillness, slicing through the festive atmosphere like a knife. It was a sound that sent chills down spines, a cry of terror that echoed through the office, leaving everyone frozen in place. "What was that?" Caitlin's voice trembled, her witch's hat slipping askew as she clutched her broomstick tightly. "I don't know, but it came from the supply room," Brad replied, his brow furrowing as he exchanged worried glances with Paige. "Let's go check it out," Paige said, her heart racing. She felt a surge of adrenaline, a mix of fear and determination. The group moved cautiously, their footsteps muffled by the carpet, the festive decorations now feeling more like a sinister backdrop than a celebration. As they approached the supply room, the door stood ajar, swinging slightly as if beckoning them closer. The dim light from the hallway barely illuminated the interior, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch toward them. "Hello," Mary-Kate called out, her voice wavering. "Is anyone in there?" No response came, only the oppressive silence that hung in the air like a thick fog. Paige pushed the door open wider, her heart pounding in her chest. The sight that greeted them was one they would never forget. Lying on the floor, surrounded by scattered office supplies, was Ashley. Her costume, a vibrant fairy outfit, was now marred by the dark stain spreading across the floor beneath her. Her eyes were wide open, staring blankly at the ceiling, and a look of terror was etched on her face. "Oh my God!" Caitlin gasped, her hands flying to her mouth as she stumbled back. Brad rushed forward, kneeling beside Ashley, his hands trembling as he checked for a pulse. No, this can't be happening," he whispered, his voice breaking. Paige felt the world tilt beneath her. She couldn't process what she was seeing. "We need to call the police," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Are you crazy?" Mary-Kate exclaimed, her eyes darting around the room. "We can't. What if the killer is still here?" Panic surged through the group as the reality of their situation began to sink in. They were trapped in the office, the doors locked, and now one of their own lay dead. "Everyone, listen." Brad's voice rose above the chaos, commanding attention. "We need to stay calm. We can't let fear take over. We have to figure out what happened." "Figure out what happened," Caitlin echoed, her voice rising in pitch. "Someone is dead, Brad. How can we just sit here and figure it out? Because if we don't, we might be next," he snapped, his frustration boiling over. Paige felt a wave of nausea wash over her. "We need to stick together," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "If there's a killer among us, we can't let them pick us off one by one." The group exchanged uneasy glances, the weight of their predicament settling heavily on their shoulders. Okay, Mary-Kate said, her voice trembling but resolute. "Let's go back to the main area. We can lock the doors and figure out who was last with Ashley." As they retreated from the supply room, the reality of their situation loomed over them like a dark cloud. The festive decorations that had once brought joy now felt like a cruel joke, mocking their fear and confusion. Back in the main office, they gathered in a tight circle, the flickering lights casting eerie shadows on their faces. "Who was the last person to see Ashley?" Paige asked, her eyes scanning the group. "I was with her earlier," Caitlin said, her voice shaky. "We were playing that game in the break room. I saw her in the supply room a little while ago," Brad added, his brow furrowed in thought. "She was looking for some decorations." "Decorations," Mary-Kate echoed, her eyes narrowing. "Why would she be in there? It's just a supply room." "Maybe she was trying to scare us," Caitlin suggested, her voice rising in pitch. "Or maybe she found something she shouldn't have," Brad countered, his tone serious. "Stop it," Paige interjected, her voice sharp. "We can't start pointing fingers. We need to figure out what happened without jumping to conclusions." The tension in the room was palpable, each person's fear manifesting in their body language. Caitlin fidgeted with her broomstick, while Mary-Kate's hands trembled at her sides. "Let's think logically," Brad said, trying to regain control of the situation. "We need to establish a timeline. If we can figure out who was where and when, we might be able to identify the killer." "Okay," Paige said, her mind racing. "Let's start with the costume contest. We were all together for that, right?" "Except for Ashley," Caitlin pointed out, her voice barely above a whisper. "Right," Brad said, his expression darkening. "She could have been alone when it happened." The group fell silent, the weight of their realization hanging heavily in the air. "Maybe we should search the office," Mary-Kate suggested, her voice trembling. "Look for anything that could help us." "Good idea," Paige agreed, her heart racing. "But we need to stick together. No one goes off alone." As they began their search, the atmosphere grew increasingly tense. The once festive decorations now felt like a shroud of doom, each corner of the office harboring secrets that could lead to the truth, or more danger. Paige moved through the rows of desks, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel the weight of her friends' eyes on her, their fear palpable. The flickering lights cast shadows that danced along the walls, and every creak of the floorboards sent a jolt of anxiety through her. "Look over here," Caitlin called from the break room, her voice echoing in the silence. Paige rushed over, her heart racing. Kate Chapter 6 Clues and Suspicions Chapter 6 Clues and suspicions. The air in the office was thick with tension, a stark contrast to the festive atmosphere just hours before. Laughter had turned to screams, and the playful spirit of Halloween was now overshadowed by the grim reality of a colleague's death. Paige, Brad, Caitlin, Mary-Kate, and Ashley stood huddled together, their costumes now feeling more like a cruel joke than a celebration. The flickering lights cast eerie shadows on the walls, and the remnants of the party, cobwebs, jack-o'-lanterns, and half-eaten candy, seemed to mock their fear. As they gathered in the break room, the reality of their situation settled heavily on their shoulders. The news of the crash had been unsettling enough, but now, with a body in the supply room, the Bermuda Triangle felt less like a distant mystery and more like a looming specter. They were trapped, and the killer was among them. "Okay, we need to figure this out," Paige said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. She brushed a stray hair behind her ear, her witch's hat slipping slightly. "We can't just sit here and wait for something else to happen." "Who would do this?" Caitlin whispered, her witch costume suddenly feeling suffocating. "It has to be someone we know. Someone we trust. Or someone who knows us," Brad added, his brow furrowed in thought. "We need to think about who had access to the supply room. Who was around when it happened." Mary-Kate, still in her zombie makeup, shuddered. "I can't believe this is happening. It's like a horror movie. What if the killer is just waiting for us to turn our backs?" Ashley, who had been quiet, finally spoke up. "We can't let fear control us. We need to investigate. There might be clues. Something that tells us who did this." The group exchanged glances, a silent agreement passing between them. They would not let fear paralyze them. They would confront the darkness head-on. As they moved cautiously toward the supply room, the atmosphere grew heavier. The fluorescent lights buzzed ominously, and every creak of the floorboards felt amplified in the silence. The door to the supply room stood ajar, a chilling invitation to the unknown. Paige pushed the door open, and the sight inside sent a wave of nausea through her. The body lay sprawled on the floor, lifeless and still. The sight was a stark reminder of their grim reality. They had to find answers, and fast. "Look for anything unusual," Brad instructed, his voice low and serious. "Anything that could give us a clue." They fanned out, each taking a corner of the room. Paige's heart raced as she rummaged through the shelves, her fingers brushing against dusty boxes and forgotten supplies. She felt a sense of urgency. They needed to find something. Anything that could lead them to the truth. "Hey, over here." Caitlin's voice broke through the tension, drawing their attention. She stood by a stack of boxes, her expression a mix of excitement and fear. "I found something." The group gathered around her, peering at the small, crumpled piece of paper she held in her hand. It was a receipt, dated just a few days prior, for a flight to the Bermuda Triangle. The name on the receipt was familiar, sending a chill down Paige's spine. "Isn't this?" Mary-Kate started, her voice trailing off as she recognized the name. "That's the victim's name. Why would they be buying a ticket to the Bermuda Triangle?" Ashley asked, her eyes wide with disbelief. "What does this mean?" "It means they were involved in something," Brad said, his tone grave. "Something that could have led to this." Paige felt a knot tighten in her stomach. "We need to find out more. We need to talk to everyone who was at the party. Someone must know something." As they left the supply room, the weight of the receipt felt heavy in Paige's pocket. The group reconvened in the main office area, where the remnants of the party still lingered. The atmosphere was thick with fear and suspicion, and the once vibrant decorations now felt like a shroud of doom. "Let's split up," Brad suggested, his voice steady. "We can cover more ground that way. Talk to everyone, see if anyone noticed anything strange." "Are you sure that's a good idea?" Caitlin asked, her voice trembling. "What if the killer is watching us?" "We can't let fear dictate our actions," Brad replied firmly. "We need to be smart about this. Stay in pairs, and keep your phones on. If anything feels off, call for help." Reluctantly, the group agreed. Paige paired with Brad, while Caitlin and Mary-Kate teamed up, leaving Ashley to investigate on her own. As they moved through the office, the atmosphere felt charged, each corner hiding potential danger. Paige and Brad approached the first group of colleagues they found, a cluster of employees huddled together, their faces pale and anxious. The chatter was low, filled with nervous laughter that felt forced. "Hey, can we talk to you guys for a second?" Brad asked, his voice cutting through the tension. The group turned, their expressions shifting from surprise to apprehension. "What do you want?" one of them asked, crossing his arms defensively. "We're trying to piece together what happened," Paige said, her voice steady. "Did anyone notice anything unusual before the incident?" The group exchanged glances, and Paige could see the fear in their eyes. "We were just playing games," one woman said, her voice shaky. "It was all fun and games until the scream," Brad finished for her, his tone gentle. "Did you see anyone acting strange? Anyone who seemed out of place?" "I don't know," the woman replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I did see Mark leave the party early. He seemed agitated." "Mark," Paige echoed, her mind racing. "What do you mean?" "He just kept looking at his phone, like he was waiting for something. Then he just left," the woman explained, her eyes darting nervously. "Did anyone else see him?" Brad pressed, his gaze scanning the group. A few heads nodded, and Paige felt a flicker of hope. "Where can we find him?" she asked, her heart pounding. "I think he went to his car," one of the men said, glancing toward the parking lot. "He seemed really upset." "Thanks," Brad said, and they turned to leave, urgency propelling them forward. As they made their way to the parking lot, Paige's mind raced with possibilities. What had Mark been involved in? Did it connect to the victim? The parking lot was dimly lit, shadows stretching across the pavement. They approached Mark's car, a sleek black sedan parked at the far end. The air felt charged, and Paige's instincts screamed that they were getting closer to the truth. Chapter 7. The chase begins. Chapter 7. The chase begins. The flickering lights of the office cast long shadows that danced across the walls, a macabre ballet that mirrored the turmoil brewing within the hearts of Paige, Brad, Caitlin, Mary-Kate, and Ashley. Just moments ago, they had been reveling in the Halloween festivities, their laughter echoing through the cobweb-laden corners of the office. But the atmosphere had shifted dramatically when a scream shattered the night, revealing a colleague's lifeless body. In the supply room, panic had surged through the group, and now, with the weight of fear pressing down on them, they found themselves trapped in a nightmare that felt all too real. As they gathered in the center of the office, the remnants of their costumes felt like a cruel joke. Caitlin's witch hat tilted precariously on her head, and Mary-Kate's zombie makeup, once a source of pride, now seemed grotesque against the backdrop of their grim reality. The air was thick with tension, and the only sound was the distant hum of the fluorescent lights, punctuated by the occasional creak of the building settling around them. "We need to find a way out," Brad said, his voice steady but laced with urgency. He ran a hand through his tousled hair, glancing at each of his friends. "If there's a killer among us, we can't just sit here waiting to be picked off one by one." "Agreed," Paige replied, her eyes darting around the room as if the walls themselves might betray them. "But we can't just rush out blindly. We need to stick together." "Together," Ashley scoffed, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "How can we trust each other? One of us is a murderer." "Stop it, Ashley," Caitlin snapped, her voice rising. "This isn't helping. We need to focus on finding clues, not turning on each other." Mary-Kate, who had been silent, finally spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if the killer is watching us right now? What if they're waiting for us to split up?" A chill ran down Paige's spine at the thought. The shadows seemed to deepen, and the air grew colder, as if the office itself was holding its breath. "We need to investigate the supply room," she said, her resolve hardening. That's where it all started. The group exchanged uneasy glances, but the urgency of the situation propelled them forward. They moved cautiously toward the supply room, the fluorescent lights flickering ominously overhead. Each step felt like a descent into a dark abyss, the air thick with dread. As they reached the door, Brad hesitated, his hand hovering over the handle. "What if it is still there?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "We have to know," Paige replied, her heart racing. "We can't let fear control us." With a deep breath, Brad pushed the door open, and the group stepped inside. The room was dimly lit, the shadows clinging to the corners like secrets waiting to be uncovered. The body had been removed, but the remnants of the chaos lingered. Papers strewn across the floor, a broken coffee mug, and the faint scent of something metallic that made Paige's stomach churn. "Look," Caitlin pointed to a series of footprints leading away from the scene. "These weren't here before." "Footprints," Ashley echoed, her voice trembling. "What if they lead to the killer?" "Then we follow them," Brad said, determination etched on his face. "But we need to be careful." As they stepped into the hallway, the atmosphere shifted again. The lights flickered more violently, and a low, eerie sound echoed through the office, like a whisper carried on the wind. Paige shivered, glancing over her shoulder. "Did you hear that?" "Yeah," Mary-Kate said, her eyes wide. "What was that?" "Probably just the wind," Brad said, though his voice lacked conviction. "Let's keep moving." They followed the footprints, which led them deeper into the office, past the break room and into the labyrinth of cubicles. The once familiar space felt foreign and menacing, the shadows stretching and twisting as if alive. Each creak of the floorboards sent jolts of adrenaline coursing through Paige's veins. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the far end of the office, causing them all to jump. "What was that?" Caitlin gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Stay close," Brad ordered, his eyes scanning the area. "We need to check it out." As they approached the source of the noise, they found a stack of boxes toppled over, their contents spilling out onto the floor. Among the scattered papers and office supplies, something glinted in the dim light. Paige knelt down, her heart racing as she reached for it. It was a small, ornate key, its surface cold and smooth against her palm. "What did you find?" Ashley asked, peering over her shoulder. "A key," Paige replied, holding it up for everyone to see. "But what does it unlock?" "Maybe it is for a storage room or something," Caitlin suggested, her brow furrowed in thought. "We should keep it with us." "Agreed," Brad said, tucking the key into his pocket. "Let's keep moving. We can't waste any time." As they continued their search, the atmosphere grew increasingly oppressive. The flickering lights cast erratic shadows that seemed to dance just beyond their line of sight, and the whispers grew louder, echoing in their minds. Paige felt a knot of anxiety tighten in her chest, the weight of their situation pressing down on her. "Do you think the killer is still here?" Mary-Kate asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know," Brad admitted, his expression grim. "But we can't let our guard down." Suddenly, the lights went out completely, plunging them into darkness. A collective gasp filled the air, and Paige felt her heart race as panic surged through her. "Brad," she called, her voice shaking. "Can you turn them back on?" "I'm trying," he replied, fumbling for his phone. The dim glow of the screen illuminated their faces, revealing the fear etched in their features. "Stay close," Caitlin whispered, her voice barely audible. "We can't get separated." As they huddled together, the darkness seemed to close in around them, the silence punctuated only by their ragged breaths. Then, out of the stillness, a low growl echoed through the office, sending chills down Paige's spine. "What was that?" Ashley squeaked, her eyes wide with terror. "I don't know," Brad said, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. "But we need to move." With the light from Brad's phone guiding them, they stumbled through the darkness, their senses heightened. The growl echoed again, closer this time, and Paige felt a surge of adrenaline. "We have to get out of here," she urged, her voice rising in urgency. "Look," Caitlin pointed ahead, where a faint light flicked. Chapter 8. Chapter 8. The Unexpected Twist. Chapter 8. The unexpected twist. The flickering lights cast long shadows across the office, where the remnants of Halloween cheer now felt like a cruel mockery. Just moments ago, laughter had echoed off the walls, and the air had been thick with the sweet scent of candy corn and pumpkin spice. But that was before the scream shattered the festive atmosphere, before they found their colleague, Jenna, lifeless in the supply room, her costume, a vibrant butterfly, now a haunting reminder of the fragility of life. Paige, Brad, Caitlin, Mary-Kate, and Ashley had banded together, their camaraderie forged in the fires of fear and uncertainty. They had searched for clues, piecing together the mystery of Jenna's death, only to find themselves ensnared in a web of suspicion and paranoia. The Bermuda Triangle, once a topic of casual conversation, now loomed ominously over them, its secrets intertwining with their own. As the group huddled in the break room, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The remnants of their costumes felt like a cruel joke, a reminder of the fun that had turned into a nightmare. Paige, still dressed as a ghost, her white sheet now crumpled and stained, glanced around at her friends. "We need to figure this out. We can't just sit here waiting for the killer to strike again." Brad, his face pale beneath the grease paint of his vampire costume, nodded. "We thought we had a lead. The connection to the Bermuda Triangle. It has to mean something. But if we're wrong about the killer, we're all in danger." Caitlin, her witch's hat askew, looked at the others with wide eyes. "What if it is someone we trust? Someone we've been working with all this time?" Her voice trembled, and the room fell silent, the weight of her words hanging in the air like a dark cloud. Mary-Kate, still in her tattered zombie costume, crossed her arms defensively. "We need to think logically. Who had the most to gain from Jenna's death? She was the one who always got the best projects. Maybe someone wanted to take her down a peg." Ashley, dressed as a cat, flicked her tail nervously. "But who? We've all been friends for years. It doesn't make sense." The group fell into a contemplative silence, each lost in their thoughts. The flickering lights above them seemed to pulse with their anxiety, casting eerie shadows that danced along the walls. Paige's heart raced as she recalled the strange occurrences leading up to Jenna's death. The flickering lights, the ghostly apparitions, the feeling of being watched. It was as if the office itself was alive, a malevolent entity feeding off their fear. Suddenly, the break room door swung open, and a gust of cold air rushed in, sending a shiver down Paige's spine. They all turned to see a figure standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the dim light of the hallway. It was Mark, their boss, his face drawn and pale, his usual confident demeanor replaced by a look of desperation. "Guys, we need to talk," he said, his voice low and urgent. "I just got off the phone with the police. They're on their way, but they need to know everything we've found out." "What do you mean?" Brad asked, stepping forward. "You know something, don't you?" Mark hesitated, glancing back down the hallway as if expecting someone to appear. I didn't want to say anything until I was sure. But Jenna was working on a project that involved the Bermuda Triangle. She found something. Something big. I think it is connected to her death." Caitlin's eyes widened. "What do you mean? What did she find?" "I don't know all the details," Mark admitted, running a hand through his hair. "But she mentioned something about a hidden connection between our company and the crash. Something that could ruin us." The group exchanged glances, the implications of Mark's words sinking in. If Jenna had uncovered something that threatened the company, it could explain why someone would want her dead. But who? And why now? "Do you think the killer is trying to cover it up?" Mary-Kate asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mark nodded slowly. It's possible. But we need to be careful. If the killer is still here, we can't let them know we're onto them. Paige felt a chill run down her spine. The walls of the office, once a familiar space filled with laughter and camaraderie, now felt like a prison. We need to find out what Jenna discovered. It might be the key to understanding why she was killed. Let's split up again, Brad suggested, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. We can search her desk and see if she left any clues. We need to be quick. As they moved to gather their things, Paige felt a sense of dread settle over her. She had always trusted her colleagues, but now, with the specter of betrayal looming, she couldn't shake the feeling that one of them might be hiding something. The thought gnawed at her, twisting her stomach into knots. They made their way to Jenna's desk, the air thick with tension. The office was eerily quiet, the only sound the soft rustle of papers and the creak of chairs as they settled in. Paige opened Jenna's drawer, her heart racing as she sifted through the contents. A jumble of pens, sticky notes, and a half-eaten granola bar. But then, her fingers brushed against something cold and metallic. She pulled out a small flash drive, its surface gleaming under the fluorescent lights. "Guys, look at this," she exclaimed, holding it up for the others to see. "What is it?" Caitlin asked, leaning closer. "It's a flash drive. Jenna must have stored her findings on here," Paige said, her pulse quickening. "We need to see what's on it." Brad took the drive from her, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Let's plug it into the computer in the conference room. We can check it out there." As they made their way to the conference room, the tension in the air was palpable. Each step felt heavy, as if they were walking toward an inevitable confrontation. The flickering lights overhead seemed to pulse in time with their racing hearts, casting ominous shadows that danced along the walls. Once inside, Brad plugged the flash drive into the computer, and the screen flickered to life. The group gathered around, their breaths held in anticipation. The file structure was simple, but as Brad navigated through the folders, a sense of unease settled over them. "Here it is," he said, clicking on a file labeled Project Bermuda. The screen filled with documents, charts, and images that detailed Jenna's research. As they scrolled through the pages, the gravity of her findings became clear. "Look at this," Mary-Kate said, pointing to a chart that outlined a series of mysterious disappearances linked to the Bermuda Triangle. "These are all people who were involved in aviation or maritime industries. It's like they Chapter 9. The Final Confrontation Chapter 9. The final confrontation. The flickering lights of the office cast long shadows across the walls, creating an unsettling dance of darkness and light. The air was thick with tension, a palpable weight that pressed down on Paige, Brad, Caitlin, Mary-Kate, and Ashley as they huddled together, their breath quickening with each passing moment. Just hours ago, they had been laughing and celebrating Halloween, their costumes a vibrant display of creativity and camaraderie. But now, the festive atmosphere had morphed into something sinister, a nightmare that had taken root in their once safe haven. The scream that had shattered the night echoed in Paige's mind, a haunting reminder of the colleague they had lost. The revelation of the killer among them had turned their world upside down, trust unraveling like a frayed thread. As they stood in the dimly lit office, the weight of betrayal hung heavily in the air, and the specter of fear loomed larger than ever. "Are we sure we want to do this?" Caitlin's voice trembled, her witch costume now feeling more like a shroud than a playful outfit. "What if we're wrong? What if confronting them only makes things worse? We can't just sit here and wait for them to strike again," Brad replied, his jaw set with determination. "We need to face this head-on. If we don't, we might not make it out of here alive." Mary-Kate, still in her zombie makeup, nodded slowly, her eyes wide with fear but resolute. "We owe it to the victim. We need to find out why this happened. We need to understand. Ashley, clutching a makeshift weapon, a broken broomstick from Caitlin's witch costume, stepped forward, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Then let's do it, together. We can't let fear tear us apart. Paige felt a surge of gratitude for her friends, their resolve igniting a flicker of hope within her. Okay, let's stick together. We'll confront them, but we need to be smart about it. We can't let our emotions cloud our judgment. As they moved deeper into the office, the atmosphere grew heavier, the shadows stretching ominously as if alive. The sound of their footsteps echoed in the silence, a rhythmic reminder of their impending confrontation. They approached the break room, the site of their earlier investigation, where the coffee machine had malfunctioned in a bizarre display. It felt like a different world now, one where laughter had been replaced by dread. "Do you think they're in here?" Caitlin whispered, her eyes darting around the room, searching for any sign of movement. "Let's check," Brad said, pushing the door open slowly. The hinges creaked, a mournful sound that sent a shiver down Paige's spine. Inside, the break room was dark, the flickering fluorescent lights casting an eerie glow over the countertops. The coffee machine sat silent, its previous chaos now a distant memory. But something felt off. An unsettling stillness hung in the air, thick and suffocating. "Hello," Paige called out, her voice trembling as it echoed back at her. "Is anyone here?" Silence answered her, a heavy, oppressive silence that seemed to swallow her words whole. Suddenly, a noise broke through the stillness, a soft rustling, like fabric brushing against fabric. The friends exchanged glances, their hearts racing as they instinctively moved closer together. "Did you hear that?" Ashley whispered, gripping the broomstick tighter. Before anyone could respond, a figure emerged from the shadows, stepping into the dim light. It was Mary-Kate, her face pale and eyes wide with fear. "I found something," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What is it?" Brad asked, his brow furrowing with concern. Mary-Kate held up a crumpled piece of paper, its edges frayed and stained. "It was hidden in the supply closet. I think it is important." Paige stepped forward, her heart pounding as she took the paper from Mary-Kate's trembling hands. She unfolded it carefully, revealing a series of hastily scrawled notes. The words were jagged, frantic, and filled with a sense of urgency. "The Bermuda Triangle, it is all connected," Paige read aloud, her voice shaking. "The crash, the victim, they were involved in something bigger. Something dangerous." "What do you mean?" Caitlin asked, her brow furrowing in confusion. Paige scanned the notes, her mind racing. "It talks about a group that was researching the Bermuda Triangle, trying to uncover its secrets. They believed it was a gateway to something otherworldly. The victim was part of it, and now someone wants to silence them." A chill ran down Ashley's spine. So the killer isn't just a murderer. They're trying to protect something. Or hide something, Brad added, his voice low and serious. "We need to find out who else was involved." Just then, the lights flickered violently, plunging them into darkness for a heartbeat before the emergency lights kicked in, casting a dim red glow over the room. The atmosphere shifted, a palpable tension crackling in the air. "Get back!" a voice shouted from the shadows, and before they could react, the figure lunged forward, a blur of motion that sent them sprawling backward. "Run!" Paige screamed, adrenaline surging through her veins as she scrambled to her feet. The friends dashed out of the break room, the sound of heavy footsteps pounding behind them. They raced down the corridor, their hearts pounding in sync with their frantic footsteps. The office felt like a labyrinth, the familiar layout now twisted and disorienting in their panic. "Where do we go?" Caitlin gasped, glancing over her shoulder as the figure closed in on them. "Towards the exit," Brad shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "We have to make it to the front door." As they sprinted, Paige's mind raced, piecing together the fragments of the notes and the chilling realization that they were not just running from a killer. They were running from someone who believed in the very mysteries that had ensnared them. They burst into the main office area, the flickering lights casting erratic shadows that danced across the walls. The figure was gaining on them, a dark silhouette that loomed larger with each passing second. "Split up," Paige yelled, her instincts kicking in. "We'll confuse them." The friends scattered, each taking a different path through the maze of desks and cubicles. Paige ducked behind a partition, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she pressed her back against the cool metal. She could hear the figure moving through the office, their footsteps heavy and deliberate. "Where are you?" the voice called out, low and menacing. "You can't hide forever." Paige's heart raced as she fought to steady her breathing, her mind racing with thoughts of betrayal and fear. Who was this person? What did they want? And how could they possibly escape? Suddenly, she heard a commotion nearby, a crash followed by a scream. It was Ashley. Panic surged. Chapter 10. Chapter 10. Aftermath and Reflection. Chapter 10. Aftermath and Reflection. The air was thick with the acrid scent of burnt coffee and fear, the remnants of a night that had spiraled into chaos. The flickering lights of the office, once a festive backdrop for Halloween revelry, now cast long shadows that seemed to whisper secrets of betrayal and loss. The police had arrived, their blue and red lights flashing like a heartbeat in the darkness, a stark reminder of the horror that had unfolded. Paige stood by the window, her arms wrapped tightly around herself as she gazed out at the street below. The world outside felt impossibly normal, with cars passing by and pedestrians going about their lives, blissfully unaware of the nightmare that had just transpired within the walls of their office. She could still hear the echo of the scream that had shattered the night, the sound reverberating in her mind like a haunting melody. "Paige." Brad's voice broke through her thoughts, a gentle nudge back to reality. He approached her, his expression a mixture of concern and determination. "Are you okay?" She turned to him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I don't know, Brad. I can't believe this happened. We were just having fun," and then her voice trailed off, the weight of the night pressing down on her chest. "I know," he said softly, stepping closer. "But we made it through. We're alive, and we're together." He reached out, brushing a stray hair behind her ear, the warmth of his touch sending a shiver down her spine. Caitlin and Mary-Kate were huddled together on the couch, their costumes now a stark contrast to the grim reality they faced. Caitlin's witch hat was askew, and Mary-Kate's zombie makeup had smudged, giving her an almost comical appearance despite the gravity of the situation. They exchanged glances, their expressions mirroring the confusion and fear that had settled over the group like a heavy fog. "Do you think they'll find out who did this?" Caitlin asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mary-Kate nodded, her brow furrowed. "They have to. It can't just end like this. We need to know why it happened." The sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway as the police officers moved through the office, their voices low and serious. Paige felt a knot tighten in her stomach. The investigation felt surreal, like a scene from a horror movie, and yet it was all too real. "Hey," Brad said, drawing her attention back to him. "We need to talk about what happened. We can't just pretend it didn't." Paige nodded, her heart racing. "You're right. We need to process this. But how do we even start?" "Maybe we should share what we know," he suggested, glancing at the others. "We all saw things, heard things. Maybe there are pieces we're missing." Caitlin and Mary-Kate exchanged hesitant looks before nodding in agreement. "Okay," Caitlin said, her voice steadier now. "Let's start from the beginning. We were all together when it happened. We need to remember everything." As they began to recount the events of the night, the tension in the room shifted. Each revelation brought with it a wave of emotions: fear, anger, confusion. They spoke of the costume contest, the laughter that had filled the air, and the sudden shift when the news report had interrupted their fun. "I still can't shake the feeling that the crash was connected," Mary-Kate said, her eyes wide. "It was too coincidental. Maybe it was a warning," Caitlin added, her voice trembling. "The Bermuda Triangle, it is known for strange occurrences. What if this was just the beginning?" Paige felt a chill run down her spine at the thought. "You think the killer was trying to send us a message? Or maybe they were trying to scare us into silence," Brad suggested, his jaw tightening. "We need to be careful. We don't know if they're still out there." The weight of his words hung in the air, a palpable tension that settled over them like a shroud. They were no longer just colleagues. They were survivors, bound together by a shared trauma that would forever alter their lives. As the police continued their investigation, the friends found themselves retreating into a corner of the office, seeking solace in each other's presence. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sterile glow that felt at odds with the chaos of their emotions. "I can't believe we were so naive," Caitlin said, her voice cracking. "We thought we were just having fun. We didn't see the danger lurking beneath the surface." Mary-Kate reached out, squeezing her hand. "We can't blame ourselves. None of us knew. We trusted each other." "Trust," Paige echoed, the word heavy on her tongue. "It's what brought us together, but it is also what nearly tore us apart." Brad's gaze flickered between the two women, his expression thoughtful. "We need to rebuild that trust. We can't let this tear us apart. We're stronger together." The sincerity in his voice resonated with Paige, igniting a flicker of hope within her. "You're right. We can't let fear dictate our lives. We have to move forward." As they spoke, the atmosphere began to shift. The fear that had gripped them slowly transformed into a determination to face whatever lay ahead. They would not be defined by this tragedy. They would rise from it, stronger and more united than ever. Just then, the sound of footsteps approached, and a police officer entered the room, his expression serious. "I need to speak with all of you," he said, his voice steady. The friends exchanged wary glances, the weight of the moment settling over them once more. "Is it about the investigation?" Caitlin asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The officer nodded. "We have some questions, and we need your cooperation. It's important that we get to the bottom of this." As they gathered around the officer, Paige felt a surge of anxiety. The truth was still shrouded in mystery, and the shadows of the night loomed large. But as she looked at her friends, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. They would face this together, no matter what. The officer began to ask questions, and as they spoke, Paige couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper was at play. The Bermuda Triangle had always been a source of intrigue and fear, but now it felt like a dark specter looming over them, whispering secrets that only they could uncover. Hours passed, and the investigation continued, but the friends remained resolute. They shared their stories, piecing together the fragments of the night, their voices rising and falling like a haunting melody. As the sun began to rise, casting a pale light through the office windows, Paige felt a sense of clarity wash over her. They had survived the night. Chapter 1 The Halloween Office Party Chapter 1